Greetings and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Don Taylor. I teach sustainability at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier, Vermont. And welcome to the 8th episode of our Season 8 Middle Grades Conversations. I'm joined by middle level educators and teachers and professors, and we're here to talk about middle level education. This work is sponsored by the Middle Grades Institute. And thank you, everybody, for viewing or joining us. I'm going to give it to Katie Farber.
Hi, Katie Farber, assistant professor at St. Mike's College.
I'm Joe Rivers at Brattleboro Area Middle School, social studies teacher there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Pioli-Hunt. I'm a 5/8 journalist on Swift House at Williston Central School.
Hi there, Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities to 7th and 8th graders at Shelburne Community School.
All right, and thanks everybody for joining us on what is turning out to be another beautiful spring day. The first question I have before we get going into our prompts just is, how are things going with you in your learning community? And what are you starting to notice about students as we move into this kind of final stretch of the year? And Katie?
Yeah, so it's a little different for me, right? Because I work with undergraduate students now, and the end of the semester is really heating up for them, and they have a lot of things going on. So I'm noticing that kind of tiredness behind their eyes, that sort of sense of overwhelm. So we're settling into some environmental and outdoor ed right now, and we went out and played that classic game Bat and Moth, where you simulate echolocation by like shaking a sound maker, and then I don't know if you've played that, but there's one person that's blindfolded, that's the bat, and they're trying to tag the moth, and they each have a little sound maker. And so every time the bat calls, the moth has to answer, kind of like that game you played in the pool, Marco Polo. And so just the release of them laughing and playing was really important. And so it makes me think that middle school students are probably quite similar in that way and needing some of that.
There we go. I had to run to close the door because the furnace just kicked on. But anyway, let's see, beginning or the end, we're getting close to the end of the year. So what's going on different for young people? Well, the weather's changing. And so some of them are getting a little antsy, and some of them already were antsy. And some of us as adults are antsy. We're on vacation this week, so I can be a little more casual than I sometimes feel at this time. Some of the things that we do, though, we have students for 2 years, we loop. And so we're in the middle of a loop right now, winding down 7th grade and heading into 8th. And so our transitions are mostly around focusing on short-term goals, survival skills really for middle school, and then trying to have young people start to think about things like this time next year you will already have figured out your high school schedule. So how do we get you from here to there, and what are some things we need to do in order for you to feel more comfortable about that? And we focus on skills, and we try to coordinate or connect those skills that we're working on directly with, these are things that you need to be thinking about as you head into high school. You want to have as many options as possible, so you want to have as robust a list of skills you feel comfortable with as you can have. So let's try to work on these things so you have more choice when you get to have more choices as high school starts to come your way. So those are the kind of conversations we have. We just finished having student-led conferences, and those were definitely students demonstrating where they started at the beginning of 7th grade and where they are now, and then having conversations with the adults in their lives about where they want to go next. And so that's kind of baked into our program over 2 years, is the idea of student-led stuff. And I don't know, I'll pass that on to the next person.
Yeah, it's funny, like hearing Katie, I love what you just said, like finding those moments to bring out joy and laughter. That's key right now. And yeah, to Joe's point with the weather, it's the energy's up, and it was funny last week when we were having that gorgeous weather at the end of the week. We of course got everybody outside at the end of the day, and we said goodbye to them on Friday, and they all ran to the bus and were like, that just felt like the last day of school. We were saying goodbye for the summer. Because we have 8 weeks left. So we kind of look at each other with that shock of we're gonna have to hunker down here for a bit. Yeah, it's that finding that right balance of harnessing that energy when it's there and staying loose enough, but also maintaining expectations and knowing that there's still work to be done. And we have some different projects and stuff coming up, which we're really excited about. We are spring breaks next week, and then it's always just an absolute sprint afterwards. So we're just kind of buckling down and getting ready for that work to come up.
Oh my gosh, I can relate to all of the above. I feel like my negotiation skills are getting really honed because it's like, show me this work before we can take this break. Let's crank for this many minutes before we can do this because the weather has been so lovely. I also really appreciate, we weren't ready at the start of the year to do some of the values work that we wanted to do. We just didn't have the stamina with kids yet and our own routines down. And so now at the end of the year, we're having kids do some values work that's coming out of our parent conferences where we did just talk, or student-led conferences where we just talked about like, hey, what's an experience that you want to make sure you have between now and the end of the year to feel like you're ready for what's to come. And so what might that be? And it could be something I want to get better about, or it could be something like, I want to try this now while I'm in this kind of safe environment. And so that conversation with kids and families, and then the values work, like I'm excited. I feel like they are ready to think about some of those things before it's like a free for all, right? Just like the wheels fall off the bus. So I think my negotiation skills are getting harnessed. And we're also trying to do some community project work, which is daunting and exciting all at once.
All right, I can concur, although that image Kevin just mentioned of sending the kids off to the bus and feeling it like summer and then looking at the calendar and saying, wait a minute, it's April 14th is a little troubling. That sounds like nightmare material, to be honest. But it's hard to explain, I guess, where I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what I am as a teacher and considering where I need to be. And one of the reasons is that I've had a couple challenging situations in the last week or two, and mostly around, behaviors and expectations, and really wanting to hold on to my expectations and thinking about, can we do hard things anymore? Or do I have different kids in the classroom and things like stamina? And then are kids different now? Are the kids that I have in my classroom different now? And then I asked this question, I said to somebody, is it me? And I'm thinking a lot about that because it probably is me. And so if it is, how do I change to be a teacher who maybe I want to be? Or how do I get beyond, how do you reflect deeply enough about your practice that you can be sensible and wise? And this leads me to a very interesting question that was posed. Over the weekend, I completed the Shelburne Farms Climate Resiliency. And we were, doing a lot of discussions and reflecting. And one of the questions they asked is, how do you want to be thought of or considered as an elder? Right. And I'm not getting any younger. And I've just been really thinking about that. Like, how do you bring wisdom to your classroom every day and maintain those high expectations and engage kids and have have like meaningful both relationships and experiences with kids? Like, what does that take? And so I have some classes right now that are clicking on all cylinders. I have other classes that it's a real challenge. And one of the things that is just, kind of blows my mind is I had a really tough day yesterday with one class. And you're just like, oh man, I'm coming in hot tomorrow. I'm like, oh. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to have them self-assess. I'm going to read their self-assessments, and then I'm going to just kind of move on from there. And every single kid who was a challenge yesterday wrote down, yep, I was a challenge yesterday. And here's what, they know, and they know. And I think deep down, I have to assume they want to get better, And so how do you create a platform and an experience for them to do that in a way that is mutually beneficial, right? And that just honors them and how they're growing. And it also allows you to, to be like, man, you're doing a really great job and you're really growing and learning. And so that's just something I'm thinking about. And that kind of these 24 hours, I'm just wicked tired. I can't wait for Saturday morning because it's right. And so that's been really good. And we've been taking a lot of community walks. We've been doing phenology. We've been looking, down in Montpelier here, things are already, buds are bursting, forsythias are in bloom, daffodils. And I've got to believe we're 2 or 3 or 4 weeks ahead of where we should be. So getting kids out. The other thing I want to mention too, I know this is kind of a Katie Barber deal, is that the North Branch Nature Center just sent out this awesome thing about the salamanders and the amphibians and all this. And it's a really cool kit that you can actually use right in your classroom. And so just stuff like that's going on, and making kids interested and curious about the outdoors is something that we're working on as well. So I think a lot of us started to answer, our question and started to think about it. But as we're moving towards the end of the school year here, what are some of the actual, the nuts and bolts activities? A lot of you mentioned student-led conferences. Some of you mentioned these conversations and discussions. And for viewers out there who are asking themselves, how do I really build up to the kind of that climax of the end of the year where everybody feels really good about where they are? What are some of those maybe traditions or rituals or, activities that you're going to be using or thinking about to get kids in the right place as we move, into that transition into the next grade or their next life and learning stage? And I know it's kind of a long question, but Katie, what do you think?
Well, you have me thinking about a lot of other things with what you just talked about. So my brain's kind of sliding out on that. But as far as when I would close the year with 5th and 6th graders, we definitely did a lot of sort of especially because it was the culminating year in the elementary school, there was a lot of reflection about how far they had come, people that they needed to thank in that school as they were embarking, perhaps to the middle high school. So those kind of experiences were really important. And even on that last day of school, I remember I had this conch shell that we would put in the middle of our circle, and everybody would take a turn holding it and saying compliments or memorable experiences about each member of the community. And it often took a while, but it felt really like an important rite of passage for everybody. And I had to sort of fend off the schedule and everybody that wanted them to be doing other things because it was our closing circle, and it had a lot of meaning. But things like making a guidebook for the upcoming class, what are the tips for, middle school, your first year of middle school? What are those kind of activities that are looking back and looking forward, reflective, were always really important. And then just playing, just having these are the last days of our community being together. So what do we want to remember? How do we want to go for, just playfulness and collaboration and then service, like helping the younger grades with their closing activities and their festivals and their culminating events. And then also just not buying into this scarcity rush mindset that that is pervasive around schools, and trying to step out of that a little bit and remember that this is a moment in time for these kids, and it's going to be over soon. So those are some ideas. Oh, and then one of my favorite prompts, I just have to say, I'm going to use it a lot this in my last few classes here. Like, I used to think, but now I think, right? Those that classically simple, what are those items that you can focus on that you used to, and maybe it was, I used to be scared of coming to middle school, and now, it's just, we're looking for that growth, and we're trying to get people to vulnerably share some of their shifts.
Katie, can I jump in and just ask you, you've mentioned a scarcity mindset, I think. Can you talk just a little bit more about what that entails?
Yeah, so we see this across a lot of contexts. Are we living in a way where we're looking constantly for deficits and what we don't have? Are we looking at students for what they don't have first instead of seeing their assets? Are we looking at our community in that way? Are we, is everything scarce? In schools, time is scarce. Time is the commodity, and everybody wants you to sort of buy into this like frenetic pace, right? Where you're just, oh, I need you, I need this, this is a crisis, constantly. And it's not great for nervous systems of teachers. It's not great for nervous systems of students. And when we all buy into that, we're all just perpetually exhausted and depleted and rushing from fire to fire versus like having time to consider big ideas and reflect and to collaborate. And I really had to work against that in public schools. And some days I really lost the fight, and other days I could do it even just for a little bit. And so that's important to remind me now. And, if I could go back and tell my younger teacher self that, I would say, hey, you don't have to buy into that all the time. You can make space and room and time for yourself and for your students.
That sounds like wisdom. How old are you, Katie? Just following up Don's, when you get older, you're supposed to be one. The thought for me is, at this time of year, a tradition, I don't know if it's a tradition, but a practice, I hope, is reciprocity. And the young people have gotten to know me pretty well, and I've gotten to know them pretty well. So we should be able to have give and take conversations around, here's the project coming up, here are the parameters I've got, how can this work? So I don't want to call it, well, some people use the phrase negotiated curriculum. I don't know if sometimes that seems too broad to me. There are definitely parameters that everybody has to play within, but within those parameters, we should be able to do things together by now. So that's something this time of year, I look forward to getting to that point. And I think we are at that point. And so we have a tradition of a month-long project right about this time of year. And that project is something that we do in concert with the other team that loops at the same time that we do. So both 7th grade teams do this project together, and we work collaboratively with the other social studies teacher and with the librarian. And the project has 6 or 7 elements to it, and students have a lot of choice within those elements to go forward. But it's something we tweak every time we do it. It's not the same every time. And that's the part where the reciprocity hopefully comes into play, where I've gotten a sense of where these folks are, what I've been able to give them or introduce during the course of the year, so that I know what expectations there should be around what products should come out of this. And it's not always the same, every time we do it. The topics change and all that sort of stuff. But that's a tradition. That's something that we try to do together. And it's something that's known, and it's something that's school-wide. And so it goes beyond the doors of what's the traditional, well, on this team, we do it this way, and on that team, we do it that. That kind of thing goes by the wayside for this. And so people feel like they're part of something that's bigger than them as they're working on the project. And it culminates with the public being invited in an evening, and they get to see the project in all its different pieces, and it's a very public process. And so that would be an example. And one thing that we're trying to do differently this time around, research without Google. And so all of our research is being done with primary sources outside of the framework of using Google to search for anything. And that's just a goal for this time around. It's something that I feel pretty strongly about, and we've been able to move in that direction. So every time there's different sets of goals and parameters that seem to make sense. All right, I've talked enough. Kevin.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was thinking about some of the traditions we have. Again, I'm really lucky that we're on a 5-8 team. So we've developed these amazing relationships with our students for 4 years and their families. So a couple of things that we do that's kind of been on our team, I think, since it started back in 1990. We have an 8th grade challenge. So at the beginning of the school year, 8th graders pick a topic that they're passionate about or something they want to learn more about. And what we did is we modeled this off of the CVU grad challenge that they used to do. So basically throughout the year, the 8th graders dig into this research, and it culminates at the end of the year. The last week of school or so, we'll have a community panel come in, and the 8th graders give like a pretty big formal presentation. It's about 10 or 15 minutes long about their findings, what they learned. They link up with a mentor throughout the year, and they have to, we give them some requirements in terms of how often they meet with their mentor. They have to have some certain hours of kind of community service and community involvement, and then a community connection. So like, what are they providing for the community with this as well? So that's kind of a big like rite of passage for our 8th graders. And then let's see what else. We kind of linking up with that, every year we take our students to either Washington, D.C. or New York City for a week. We stay in a hostel, and it's a very student-led trip. The only 2 things that we do as a big group is a Major League ball game and a big Italian dinner. Outside of that, they get to pick all their own locations and happenings, and they all pick projects related to that. And then the week after they get back, we have a big open house with the families, and the students do an independent project and kind of share out what they learned about it, put all their findings together there too. So that's a fun, like, kind of send off as well. And for that trip, our 8th graders will, again, part of their requirement is they have to meet somebody that's connected to their topic and have like a formal interview while they're in the city. So that's, again, just a pretty neat opportunity for them for that transition. And then we have just kind of a fun team thing. The last day of school, we go to the sandbar. We take everybody out there as a celebration, and we have all of our 6th and 7th graders. We'll make superlatives for the 8th graders and do like a fun send off for them that way. And then on Swift House, one of our traditions is we present anybody who's been involved with our team with a sterling silver Swift pin. And, it's our motto is fly forever. It's just kind of like a representation that you've been on our team. You're always part of the family, and that lifelong learning and flying forever. And then they all wear it to their graduation, which is a pretty neat thing to see during their graduation as well. And one of the last things that we do on the last day for our 5th, 6th, and 7th graders is have them write a core placement letter to us. So there's 4 core teachers that kind of act as like the homeroom, and we ask students to answer some prompts just about like their learning profiles, who they might want as a core teacher, who they want as friends in their core classes. And then we just make sure we honor those. And we ask them at the end of the letter, like, would you rather have one of your top 2 core teacher preferences, or rather have some of these specific friends? And then we look at all those letters and start the jigsaw puzzle process of putting everything together and thinking about the upcoming 5th graders we have and linking up mentors and mentees. So it's nice to have these traditions. And again, what's really nice is being on a 4-year team, like our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders see these things. So like they know it's coming, and really, especially by the time they're in 8th grade, like they know about the 8th grade challenge. They know about getting in the community. They know about like setting up the interview and having the big presentation at the end. And it becomes more of an excitement than it is a worry for them. So it's nice to be able to get back to these things after a couple years of not being able to do them with COVID. It feels good.
I love hearing all that, Kev. I really miss more than a 2-year relationship. I loved having that 3 years of sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. It just made such a difference. Gosh, this is what I love about this group is that like last month when we were together and we were talking about project-based learning and community learning, and I apologize for not remembering our guest's name, but she mentioned the Bringing School to Life book, the place-based book. So I ordered it right that day, and it came in the mail the other day. I'm so excited because we are just starting to dive in. Wendy Halleck is my teammate, and I in our humanities classes diving into community, establishing community partners, and then hopefully building those traditions of ways that our students are continually involved in the community. And so not unlike what you're doing, Don, with your group. I don't know what how far we're going to be able to take it, but it has been a lot of work and a little frenetic and perhaps not as organized as it should be. But the option to not do it didn't seem fair either, right? Like to avoid it because it's too hard, or it's like, or not with this group, right? We were like, we can't do that. And so we and Joe, listening to what you were saying, like the iteration of it, I love the idea of honoring that those just primary sources. What a cool way of really having kids or whatever the parameters might be, how that becomes iterative like that. So saying all that means that we don't necessarily, we have a couple of little traditions that we do towards the end of the year, but we haven't really, I don't know, with COVID and other factors going on, we don't necessarily have really big traditions that that are established yet. We were a brand new team going into COVID, and so we haven't necessarily found our path to carving what is it going to look like necessarily. But I guess I think, and Kev, I've been thinking about this after listening to Alex Chevron Bennett, is like predictability, routines, like really trying to help calm some of the frenetic energy that we start to see at the end of the year. And so that seems to fly in the face of trying to do this community project thing where we're mixing up the schedule a little bit. So that's where I'm sitting with, right? Is like, I'm excited about this community project. It's going to be a little chaotic. We have testing coming up, which is don't even get me started with that. But like, so we've got these like opportunities to do some really cool stuff at the risk of it being chaotic and unpredictable. So that's where I'm at.
All right, thank you. I guess I'm experienced. This is my second year in a program where I have kids for quarters. So I don't have the opportunity to see a kid grow across the entire year. But we, I know Meg just mentioned chaos a little bit, and somebody once said, out of chaos come opportunities. And one of the things that I did this year was create a leadership group for our whole program that I've been with for the entire year. And those kids, I'm not quite sure what they think about what they've done because there are a lot of eighth graders, but in my view, they're just crushing it. And I couldn't have asked for a better group of kids. And it's been pretty awesome. And so to honor them, we are trying to go on a canoe trip on Friday, June 9th. We're going to try and paddle across Wrightsville Reservoir with 18 7th and 8th graders. And I just hope that it's sunny and nice and that we can go swimming and we can all come back. That's my mission right now, but I'm hoping that becomes sort of our tradition, is to kind of have this outdoor little excursion. And then in the future, I'm hoping that it becomes an outdoor overnight, and then eventually maybe some sort of outdoor exploration thing at the culmination of the year so that we can really go over. I liked what Katie said before I was this and now I'm that, and or however that might work, but have sort of a culmination of leadership activities. And then the other thing that we started doing last year, so this will just be our second year, is we're having a pancake breakfast for all the 8th graders, and the 7th graders usually are the ones who are doing all the cooking and preparation for that. And this year we'll be able to use our own maple syrup, which is going to be pretty cool, because we just finished the sugaring. And so those are some of those traditions that, you want to kind of build on. And I think kids really, when they see that, I think it really resonates. And I'm trying to make those as, fun and rewarding and also meaningful for the kids as possible. But, that's a long way away. And one of the things that people keep mentioning is this idea of like scarcity and the frenetic pace. And that's something I'd have to say that over the past couple of years, I've never realized how much schedule can just like what your schedule is kind of how you feel. And my schedule is 10. I have 10 kind of blocks right across the day. And it's just bam, bam, bam. And it's just, there's no time to like reflect or just like bring it down a notch. And so that's something that I'm really thinking about. And when Katie mentioned that scarcity mindset and kind of changing the pace, how hard is it for, we're adults, and to change the pace can be very difficult. How much of a challenge is that for kids, right? Like, how do you slow down? And we talk about kids having all this energy. Is it because of what we're doing, And so are we making it more difficult for ourselves? And that's something I'm thinking about quite a bit recently. And then the other thing is language. I'm thinking about language and framing a lot, and how the language we use impacts kids, and what we can be doing to change our language so that we achieve the same ends, but with in a more positive way. So I talked about, some challenges in the last couple of days. And one of the things I'm working really hard on is to come back to those kids and be like, man, you were awesome today. Like, boy, if we were this consistent with this kind of behavior, you'd be like, you'd be up and away, and just doing that, trying to do that all the time. You know what I mean? Like all the time. And even with the kids who are kind of really challenging, just using our language and reframing, and then just staying calm, because sometimes you feel like what they want is to see you just like, boom, pop. And if you can just like be super calm and there's actually a deep satisfaction when you're just sitting there like calm, and you're just like dealing with it, and it's like so beautiful. I'm being calm here, man. This is awesome. And you can just ride that. And I think that's important. I think it's important for kids to see that too. But this idea of language and really trying to be supportive and reframing what we're doing, because I think in that chaos, in that frenetic pace, I think we have a tendency to, to get wound up in a way that's not positive. So I really appreciate every time I'm taking notes about all these different things. And I guess I just kind of led up to our last question. I started talking about language. That's something I'm thinking about a lot, reframing. I also mentioned this leadership group, and I'm wondering how I can get that to be a more diverse and equitable representation of our kids. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're recruiting, right? We're going out, we're having open meetings, the kids are designing activities. So I'm having our leadership group is actively recruiting for the next generation of leaders. And my emphasis is on, who are the kids who might be under the radar, who would flourish and shine in this kind of environment, and how can I get them to participate? Because some of those kids are not always supported in taking chances. So my last question is sort of, as we're moving now into these, these traditions and rituals, as an educator, what are the pieces that you're kind of focusing on, or that you might be trying to emphasize or thinking about changing in your practice? For me, as I just mentioned, it's probably language, and it's also reframing, and then, recruiting and creating a more diverse and equitable leadership group? And that'll be our last question. I know it's kind of a big one, but like, what are the things that you're really working on or identifying as places in your practice that you'd like to improve as we move down the home stretch here? Katie?
So much to think about there. Don, when you were just speaking, it was reminding me about like the concept of reactivity, right? And as if you're a parent or a caregiver or as an educator, it's like checking your own reactivity is really a challenge, right? And it's how can you hold space, give yourself a little distance, acknowledge the feeling that's coming to you, defensiveness or negativity, and almost treat it like, hello, I see you there, anxiety. I see you pulled up a chair. Okay. I see you, and now I'm going to do a few things and then move on, right? Like it's almost like getting a little distance between it and your reaction. For me, it was really helpful, especially with students that, sometimes I needed more patience with. So that has me sort of thinking about that concept of reactivity. And then for me personally, I know that people have a negativity bias, right? Like they're drawn to the negative, like that's the sticky thing, right? So how can I have a positive opening and a positive closing of every single class? Like how can I, even when the students are really stressed, say like, what is one good thing you saw today? Did you notice that the crocus was out? Did you see the big fat squirrel that was like running around under the tree? Like, did you, like name a delight, name something that you saw. And sometimes it takes them a minute to shake off that cynicism or negativity that they're walking in with. But if they can get the mindset of getting something that they noticed and they can share it, or at least hear like 3 people share it, the energy can shift in the room. That's what I've been thinking about and trying to get them to hold space for. And then when you're talking about leadership and recruiting students in that way, it's kind of like the search for the assets of each particular student, and every single one of them has incredible assets. And so if I didn't know that you were into films or you were into this or you were into that, like, okay, tell me about that. And then would you know, like this group that we're starting, like we might be able to make a film or might be able to do this or that or whatever. A comics, like what would a comic about this school look like? Or you know what I mean? Like that kind of framing for what they have can be really powerful.
Well, let's see. More than one thing can be true. That's something I try to keep in my head, because so many things happen in a room with 20 other people, and all of them 50 years younger than I am. So I try to keep that in my head, that more than one thing is going on right now. And so I'm reacting the way I'm reacting, but observation of one thing that I should focus on and try to get better at every day is my observation skills. Because through observation, I can make connections. And oftentimes it's the observation that occurs when it's not a direct one-on-one conversation with a particular person. It's when they don't know that I'm observing that I can gather a lot of information that can be helpful. I heard the other day, someone said, no one is a villain in their own story. And I think that has a lot of truth to it, that young people come in and whatever's going on is going on for them. Some days are better than others, but nobody in their head, as they're having their self-talk, no one is a villain in their own narrative. So that's my job, is to try to be a person in their narrative as well, but being someone who helps them move in a positive way. And so those are some things that stick to me. And that I mentioned it before, but just the idea that the relationship is a reciprocal one. And so I need to honor that. I can't just think this is my way. This is the way I've always done it. Da, 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 da. That can't be the story. I have to be reacting to what is there. That's it.
Oh man, so many. I just have so many things going through my brain right now. Where to start? First, like, I mean, Katie, hearing earlier, you were talking about things you would do with your fifth and sixth graders in terms of like the looking back, looking forward type reflection. I was just like, wow, I feel like we do a lot of reflective work in the school year, but like at the end of the year, like I was just saying, we have all these traditions, and I do feel like it's high energy, fast. But like, do we actually take a second with our eighth graders to have them just like breathe and slow down, really reflect on their time with us in these 4 years? Like, you know, that's something I would really value and give them time to do that. So that's, you know, something I want to take moving forward. And then that idea of like positive opening and positive closing. We just had, I coach at the St. Mike's lacrosse team, and one thing we've been emphasizing a lot is, especially in the heat of a game, you know, focus on the controllables. Things that you have control over is always your effort and your attitude. And just earlier today, I remember I'm at the start of math class, and they're just being so rowdy. I'm just like, oh, come on, let's try to like buckle down, get into this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I can just feel the gray hairs coming in already. And I'm like, all right, something I can control right now is just how I respond to this and my attitude. So kind of went, just let's have fun, and you know, did something silly in front of the class, got their attention, got them laughing, got them working on the problem. It's like the whole class came together again. I was like, all right, like I could have gone sideways and said, I'm just gonna be really grumpy about this. And at that moment, it's like, all right, I can focus on my effort, my attitude right now. So moving forward, I'm like, all right, how can I put more emphasis on that piece of just like, I can always control my attitude and my students. And, you know, if everybody's having a hard day, like I can still show up in a really positive way for them. And just kind of do whatever I can to bring that joy and that light, and you know, to their day. So that's one thing I really want to take forward as well.
Kev, I have so many gray hairs right now. Like, it's really shocking. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking about so many things too. I guess something that became an opportunity this year was around, you know, how we have to do our professional learning, and we have to every 4 years we have our PD cycle. And this year, the opportunity came for me to, instead of having a formal observation by principal, I could go and do some observations of other teachers. And so I went down to the 5-6 team, and I just loved that opportunity. I was so grateful for it. And it just reminded me that, oops, sorry, hang on. I wish I had like elevator music to like play while I'm being paused. What I loved about that was I got to connect with 5th and 6th grade students that I don't necessarily know, and they got to know me. You know, I've only gone down there a couple of times. Our teams have tried to do some community connect together. But it changed I like thinking about next year with this group of kids, you know, instead of always feeling like we're separate. I don't know why. I mean, how many years have I been at this, but it was just really lovely. It was lovely to connect with the kids. It was really lovely to see their routines, because then I could think about, all right, what are some of these routines that I can adopt? I don't care. I can pull something together so I think just continuing to be curious is always important to me. And I guess the other thing I was thinking about that Katie said before about that scarcity mindset. I was in a professional meeting with a bunch of folks, and we're already talking about next year and how there's nothing, it's not going to change. We're still going to be behind on substitutes and all these, and it was such a bummer of a meeting. And I was like, why can't we think outside the box here? Like, why do we have to just accept that this has to be the narrative? And now that I have language for it, I want to just continue to have that conversation, because it's really frustrating and so demoralizing for people. We're exhausted right now. We don't want to be thinking about that there's no hope for that there's no possibility for change. There has to be. We are bright, intelligent people with access to resources. Let's figure this out. It does not always have to be this deficit mindset. So thank you for that, Katie. I appreciate it.
Once again, I just want to mention how valuable and important I think these conversations are. I'm just thinking about a ton of stuff. I have some vocabulary actually that is new vocabulary for me and new thinking about some of these concepts. So thank you everybody so much for your contributions. I also just want to remind folks that Up for Learning is still having their racial justice dialogues, which happen on Wednesdays. The next one, I believe, is on May 17th. And then our last conversation of the year is going to be on Thursday, May 25th, which seems like a pretty long time from now. Our conversation will probably have different tonality at that point in the year. And then also, don't forget the Middle Grades Institute is happening from June 26th to June 30th at locations across the state. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you get a chance. If you're going on break next week or you're on break, I hope you get a chance to relax and get ready for sort of this final chapter of our school year. Thank you so much. We'll be in touch. Be well and take care of yourselves. Bye now.
Bye, Don. Thanks.